in the end, why should you expect? I mean, you'll get a perfectly decent return over a 30 or 40-year period by doing what I suggest. And why should you expect more than that when you don't bring anything to the party? The salesman will tell you that you'll get it, but you won't. The equation is pretty simple, but the practice doesn't necessarily follow logic. When a stock can be bought well below its business value, that probably is the best use of cash. But I think the best use of cash, if you don't have a good use for it in the business, if the stock is underpriced, is to repurchase it. And if it's overpriced, you got no business buying in a single share. But a lot of companies do it. Well, the answer is I do believe in dividends in a great many situations, including many of the ones, companies in which we own stock. The test about whether to pay dividends is whether you can continue to create more than $1 of value for every dollar you retain. Well, I went to work for Ben Graham when I was 24. I only worked for him for less than 2 years. But I jumped out of bed every day in the morning. I was excited about what I was going to do. I was learning things. I was with a man I admired. I never asked my salary when I took that job. I moved to New York City and found out what my salary was when I got the check. But that's the way to, and I can't prescribe that for you. But I can tell you that if you're going through the motions in life, you're doing something. Now, obviously, if you need the job you have and you can't make a change, and your kids have to eat and all of that, you deal with realities like that. But when you're in a position to make choices, I always tell the kids that come visit me, I tell them, go to work for an organization you admire or an individual you admire. That means that many of them become self-employed, but but the idea, you can't get a bad result. So I was very lucky in that I found my passion early. I mean, that's not easy. That takes some luck. It just so happened my dad was in a business that had a very small office, and he had a bunch of books down there. And when I would go down there on Saturday or after school, I would start reading those books, and it turned me on. And this was before Playboy actually existed. And so, that was just plain lucky. If he'd been a minister, I'm not so sure I would have gotten quite as enthused about visiting the office. Well, I would choose what I do because I have fun at it. I'm reasonably good at it. I meet a lot of interesting people through it. No heavy lifting. It fits me. But that's not advice for you. I mean, you have to find out what's your passion in life. It's a terrible mistake to kind of sleepwalk through your life, because unless Shirley MacLaine's right, it's the only one you're going to have. And I mean, you have to be realistic. You have to just define your circle of competence accurately. You have to know what you don't know and not get enticed by it. You can't be. You have to have an interest in money, I think, or you won't be good at investing. But I think if you're very greedy, it'll be a disaster, because that will overcome rationality. I would just read I would read the Graham and the Phil Fisher books, and then read lots of annual reports, think about businesses, and try and think about which businesses you understand and which you don't understand. And you don't have to understand them all. Just forget about the ones that you don't understand. I learned from Graham first in a very, very big way, and I learned something additionally from Phil Fisher, and I learned a lot from Charlie. And the proof is in my record, actually. From 11 to 19, I was reading Garfield Drew and Edwards and McGee and all kinds of, I read every book, Gerald M. Loeb. I read every book there was on investments, and I didn't do well at all. And I had no real investment philosophy. I had a lot of things I tried. I was having a lot of fun. I wasn't making any money. And I read Ben's book in 1949 or 49 when I was at the University of Nebraska. And that actually just changed my whole view of investing. And really, it basically told me to think about a stock as a part of a business. Now, that seems so obvious. You can say, that why should you regard that as the Rosetta Stone? But it is the Rosetta Stone in a sense. Once you crank into your mental apparatus, that you're not looking at things that wiggle up and down on charts, or that people send you little missives on, saying buy this because it's going up next week, or it's going to split, or the dividend's going to get increased, or whatever. But instead you're buying a business that you've now set a foundation for going on and thinking rationally about investing. I mean, there were no analyst reports on custom frame makers. It just doesn't, and they wouldn't have been any good anyway. You have to think, but you have to think about them as in terms of their business characteristics and what they can earn on capital employed and that sort of thing. But I think the same books I read and really molded how I thought about businesses and investing. I think that they're just as valid now. I mean, I haven't seen anything in the last 25 years, and I glanced through most of the books anyway. I've seen nothing to improve on Graham and Fisher in terms of the basic approach of going about investing, which is to think about stocks as businesses and then think about what makes a good business. And really that's all there is to investing and having a margin of safety, which Ben talks about, and so on. It's not a complicated process, but it definitely requires discipline. It requires insulating yourself from popular opinion. You simply can't pay any attention to it. It just doesn't mean anything. So you can't. The idea of listening to lots of people tell you things and all that, it's just a waste of time. And you'd be better off just sitting and thinking a little bit. Charlie?
Yeah, at a deeper level of generality, if you have a passionate interest in knowing why things are happening, you always are trying to figure out the world in terms of why is this happening or why is this not happening. That cast of mind kept over long periods gradually improves your ability to cope with reality. And if you don't have that cast of mind, I think you're destined probably for failure, even if you've got a pretty high IQ. Yeah, there are a lot of different models that create a sustainable competitive advantage, and there are also some models of where you can lose it very fast. You just ask Arthur Andersen. That was a very good name in America not very long ago, and I think it would be harder to lose the good name of Wrigley's gum than the good name of Arthur Andersen. I think there's some perfectly remarkable competitive advantages that people have gotten over time. And the great trouble with the investment process is that they're so damned obvious that the stocks sell at very high prices.
Yeah, I would say we've seen relatively little correlation between investment results and IQ. I mean, not that there are a whole bunch of people out there with 80 IQs that are knocking, the cover off the ball, but there are all kinds of people with high IQs that get no place. I would say that I don't know to what extent an ability to detach yourself from the crowd, for example. I don't know to what extent that's innate or to what extent that's learned, but that's a quality you need. I would agree totally with you that a great IQ is not needed. I mean, you do not have to be terrifically smart to do well as an investor at all. And it's probably, in a sense, it's more interesting to look at why people with high IQs don't succeed, and then sort of cast out those factors, see if you can cast them out in yourself, and leave a residual that will work. Because if it's like Charlie always says, all I want to know is where I'm going to die, so I'll never go there. So if you study the people who die financially, with high IQs and say, why do they die? You'll see certain overwhelming characteristics that are present in most of the cases. And you just got to make sure that either you don't possess them, or if you do possess them, that you can get rid of them or control them in some manner.
And there's no reason why you need a high IQ to do that. There's no reason why you have to be born in some way. I do think there's certain manners of temperament that may be innate, and they may be learned, they may be intensified by experience as you go on, partially innate, but then reinforced in various ways by your experience as you go through life. But that's enormously important.